Welcome back. Today we're going to go over volume of triangular prisms. So to start out with a triangular prism uses the same formula as a rectangular prism, which is length times width times height. But to make it a triangular prism, we have to go ahead and divide by 2. And so when we look at our formula, the very first one, volume equals base times height, that's the area of the base shape times the height of the prism. But I like to look at it as length times width times height divided by 2. So basically what this entails for this first formula, the base there, it says there the base is actually a triangle, and so the area formula of a triangle is base times height divided by 2, and that's going to be equal to that area of that triangle. And then the height of the prism is the distance between the bases. So just for some practice, we have the area formula here for triangles, and area formula of triangles, we would say area equals base times height divided by 2. And we've done this a lot, so we're just going to practice real quick again. The base of this shape is 14, the height is 7, so we would do 14 times 7 divided by 2. That would give us a grand total of area equaling 49 feet squared. We do the same thing on these next two. Area equals base times height divided by 2. This side right here, that's going to be perpendicular to each other, or a 90-degree angle, so that means that 6.1 or 3.2 is the base and vice versa for the height. So we would go ahead and say area equals 6.1 times 3.2 divided by 2, and that would give us a grand total of 9.76 centimeters squared. The last triangle here, we would say area equals base times height divided by 2, and then I would say the base is 9 and the height is 10, so I would say 9 times 10 divided by 2, which would give me a grand total of 9 times 10 is 90, divided by 2 is 45, and that's meters squared. Now in this next part, it says to shade the base of each figure below and then label the height of the figure of the height of the triangular base. And the height of the triangular base. So we gotta name this the height here, but first off let's shade the base of each figure. So I go ahead and see that this is a triangular prism, so that means that the triangle there is the base. If that triangle is the base, then this other side is the other base. And then in between the two triangles, according to our definition up above, between these two triangles, that's the distance that we need, that we call the height of the prism, so that would be height. And it says here I need to label the height of the figure and then the height of the triangular base, but I'm going to skip that step because the height of the triangle would be right here, and we already know that, so I'm not really too worried about that. So I do the same thing on the next one. I shade the triangle, and I shade the other triangle. Those are my bases. And then I find the height, which would be the distance between those two. So the distance between those two triangles, we call that height. And it could be any one of those side lengths there, but I'm just going to choose this one here just to have something different. Okay, next example. Here we have a triangular prism, and we're going to find the volume of this triangular prism, and the formula that we're going to use is volume equals length times width times height divided by 2. And then I need to come over here and decide what's the length, width, and height. But if we start out with our formula and we talk about the area of the base only deals with this triangle part right here. And so if I were to cover up all of this and say, hey, what's the area formula of this triangle? Well, that would be base times height. And then we would divide it by 2. But those are my two numbers that are important. So I'm going to go through and I'd say, hey, I'm going to circle that 4 because it's important. I'm going to circle that 3.5 because it's important, and then I include it in my formula here. And then the only other number that's important here is the distance between this triangle and that back triangle, which would mean 7. So I go ahead and grab that 7, and I now have 4 times 3.5 times 7. Those are my three important numbers, and I divide that by 2. And then I go 4 times 3.5 times 7 divided by 2, and I would get a grand total of 49 feet cubed. We need to remember that the figure is named by the shape of the base. So it's called a triangular prism because the base is a triangle. Which two faces? They do not intersect. So this front triangle face and that back will never intersect, which means that they are the bases of this shape. Alright, so next example, we have some practice finding the volume. This very first one, again, there's more numbers here than what's needed, but those numbers will help us kind of see some stuff. So I start out with my formula, volume equals length times width times height divided by 2. And then plugging in the values, I need to know what are the important values. Well, anytime there's a right angle on a triangle, that tells me where the base is and then the height. So I know that the base here is 8 and the height is 6 because those are the two that are attached to that right angle. And then the distance between the two triangles, we have this front triangle and that back triangle. This distance right here is 7, so that would be my other number needed. So I'm going to go ahead and take length times width times height, which that's going to be 8 times 7 times 6 divided by 2. And then I go ahead and multiply those together and divide, and I get 168 centimeters cubed. Go ahead and pause it right here and try the next two on your own, see if you can figure that out. Hopefully you figured that out and you've worked on it. If you did, you would find that these ones already have the 3 numbers that are needed. And don't just assume because there's 3 numbers here that those are the numbers we use, but we can see that it's a length, a width, and the distance between the two the two triangles. So that is the 3 numbers we need. So I'd say volume equals length times width times height, and those are my numbers that I'm going to be using. So I would go ahead and say 9 times 12 times 8 divided by 2. I then take that information and multiply and get volume equals 432 centimeters cubed. Same thing on this next one. I need a base of the triangle, I need a height of the triangle, and I need a distance between the two triangles, and those are my 3 numbers. So I have volume equals length times width times height divided by 2. The 3 numbers I'm going to use are listed, and then I use those numbers in my formula. So volume equals 6 times 5 times 8.4 divided by 2. That means volume equals 126 centimeters cubed. Last but not least, we have 5, 6, and 7. Go ahead and look at these problems and see if you can't start them on your own. They aren't too difficult to work on, but it might take a minute to think about. So please try that on your own and make sure you pause the video. If you've tried them on your own, the very first thing it says is to draw a picture to set up the equation, set up the equation there and solve for each problem. So with these ones, I go ahead and start by drawing my picture. I'm going to draw a triangle, and then to make this a prism, all I need to do is draw that same triangle but moved over a little bit. And what I like to do is just have one of the points of these ends here be in the center of the other triangle, and then you just connect the vertices, and that makes a triangular prism. Now that I have a triangular prism, I'm looking through the information, and it says here the base of the triangle, or the triangular prism, has an area of 18 square inches. If the height of the prism is 9.5, then the volume, what's the volume of the prism? This is kind of an interesting thing where it says 18 square inches. That tells me it's already area. And all we have to do to get volume is to take area and multiply it by height. So if I do that, that tells me that the triangle area is 18. So when I have my base times height formula here, the base is 18. All I need now is the height of the prism, which that 9.5, that is the height. That's the distance between the two triangles. So that means that I'd have 18 times 9.5 for a grand total of volume equals 171 inches cubed. For this next example, I notice in here that it already tells me what the volume is, so I'm going to be working backwards on this problem. But just to start out, I'll draw a random triangle, and then I'll connect it with another triangle, and those vertices connected. And with this information, I then go ahead and I take my volume formula, and that's volume equals, and it says here area of the base. So I already have the area of the base, so I'm going to use the same volume formula, which is volume equals base times height. And I'm going to color coordinate this to kind of show you where each number comes from. So volume, I noticed up here it said volume was 240 meters cubed, so I would just write 240. And that equals the base, which the area of the base is 16, so I write 16. And then it says there, what's the height of the triangular prism? Well, that tells me that the height, we don't know it, so times h. And then that's just simple solving equations. I would then divide both sides by 16, and I would get a grand total of height equals 15 meters. Last example. The dimensions of the triangular prism are shown below. What is the volume of the prism in cubic feet? So starting out on these ones, again, I have my formula, volume equals length times width times height. I need to know which numbers here to use because there's a lot of random numbers. But if I just break it down simply and I cover up the shape and I say, okay, what's the base of this triangle? Well, the base could be 5 or 7.4, but I know over here that the height of this triangle is 7, and the base is always perpendicular. So that means that this is the base, a base of 5, the height is 7. So those are two significant numbers that I'm going to use. So I would say 5 and 7, but now I need to find the third number for the height of the prism. So one of these three numbers is the height, but only one of them goes from one triangle to the other. So the height here would be 11, and that means that I'm going to take my three numbers, 5 times 7 times 11 divided by 2. 5 times 7 times 11 divided by 2 would give me a volume of 192.5 feet cubed. I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please let me know, and have a great day.